Hey, welcome back to my channel. I cannot believe it is almost 2022. It still kind of feels like it's 2020 and it's just extended on forever, but that's another story. As the year is coming to a close, it brings with it the opportunity to look back and reflect on the year that's just coming to an end. In today's video, I'm sharing 4 running lessons that I learned in 2021 and a few goals I have for 2022. But as always, if you haven't already, click the subscribe button and the bell icon so you get notified every time I upload a new video. This really helps out my channel when you do this, so I really appreciate it. So let's talk about what I learned in 2021. The importance of strength training. I know I've talked a lot about this in other videos, but after running Boston and coming back from an injury, it really just made it so clear that I need to do more strength training and how important it is to do in my weekly routine. As well, I feel as I get older, I need to do more strength training. Research shows that women lose their muscles when they start to get older, so it's important for them to do especially heavier weights. Yay, can't wait. But it's important to be aware of this so we can kind of counteract it with, again, doing strength training. I also believe that when you do strength training, you're strengthening your muscles, your ligaments, joints, and it just helps you become a more resilient runner. I'm not saying you'll stay injury-free completely, but it does really help. And if there's something that can help stop me from being sidelined from running, then I will do it, all over it. I think one of the main reasons that I got my ITB syndrome that happened last fall and then kind of continued into the early January, February, is that I didn't do enough strength training. It was hard though because in 2021, everything shut down, including the gyms, and I didn't have any weights at home. I was used to doing heavier weights like squats and doing deadlifts and all that, and then going to nothing, I think that really had a negative impact. I finally bought more weights and it's made a world of difference. Don't get me wrong, I still miss the squat rack, the deadlifts, but it's just nice having the option to do it at home, as I just haven't joined a gym and probably won't for a while, but I think I can still get a good enough workout with these weights at home. So right now I'm doing 3 days of strength training. Maybe I should do 4. We'll see. In the new year I might kind of move my schedule around, but I'm also doing 3 days of biking or cycling inside on my indoor trainer, as well as running 6 days a week and then having 1 day completely off. This will obviously change throughout my training cycle, but right now I'm in base building, so I can have a little bit more kind of time to do more strength training or just cross training because I have a little lower mileage. After reflecting on my race in Boston, I really think that my lack of strength training had a negative impact on my race. By the end of the marathon, my hamstrings were really sore, which makes me think that there were some other things going on, like weaknesses or imbalances in other parts of my body, like maybe my glutes, that they just weren't firing enough, so then my hamstrings had to kind of take over, and they didn't like that very much. With moving to Halifax and just my schedule overall was pretty crazy, I got out of the habit of doing strength training. All I really was doing was mobility and some stretching, which is very good to do, but barely any strength training. Also, looking at all the marathoners that did really well in the major marathons this year, there was a trend. All these runners, you could tell, put an emphasis on strength training. Like for example, Nell Rojas, I think that's how you say her name, in Boston, Emma Bates in Chicago, Molly Seidel in the Olympics and New York Marathon. And these are just the female runners. I didn't even talk about the male runners. These women and just runners in general are blowing out the idea that you have to be super skinny or what marathoners used to look like, or we used to think marathoners had to look like. Of course, there's different body types, like sprinters are usually pretty jacked and so on, but you can see that you don't have to be super skinny to run a marathon. You have to have the muscles to support you for that long of a distance. So now in my base building time, I'm prioritizing strength training. I really want to make it a habit and continue it throughout my next training cycle and just help me become stronger and faster runner too. Would I prefer to just run? Yes. Do I feel like doing strength training? No. Is it worth it? Always. Another lesson I learned this year was the importance of fueling before, during, and after my runs. My husband and I started cooking a lot more after everything got shut down and we had more time to do it. Now this has continued on into this year and we're just getting even more interested and excited about cooking and baking too. Looking back at last year and before last year, I really wasn't fueling or just eating enough in general. When I was traveling around for performing, you know, it was hard to pack like lunch and dinner and snacks, and I would have to literally bring a whole cooler. So sometimes I would lump meals together or just not have a really properly balanced meal. It was kind of this vicious cycle of always traveling and never being home to cook, so you just never had time to catch up. Then being home more often, I actually had separate meals and learned how to cook even better and just figured out what worked for my body, and I was just more conscious of what I ate. After reading and listening to a lot of dietitians, especially on podcasts, I was determined to start fueling more, or just be better about fueling in general. If you're interested, one of the podcasts that I really enjoyed was Fuel for the Soul, and I'll have a link for that in the description below. Do you have any suggestions for podcasts for food or nutrition? Please tell me in a comment below. I would love to know. So one of my goals from this past year was fueling more, especially on my long runs. So I started taking a Morton 320 before my long run, and then I would have gels during my run. The Morton 320 has about 80 grams of carbohydrates in it. The gels I would pair with in my long run was Morton and Endurance Tap. And then when I got to maybe the last few major kind of long runs, I called them my dress rehearsal. Can you tell I'm a musician? But I would just use Morton, as that was what I was going to use during the race. I was really happy with how I fueled on my long runs and during the race, but I think a new goal for next year or the next race I do is to see if I can get even more gels during my race. So I'll have to practice that, but I think that's my new goal for that. I can't believe that I didn't used to eat before my runs. I wake up so hungry in the morning, and now I have granola before I go, but I think I don't know, I would wake up, roll out of bed, go for my run, and come back. But now I realize that I have way more energy when I eat and then go for my run, and I'm not as hungry during it. Who would have thought? It's so funny, these things that you realize like later on, you're like, why didn't I just eat? But in the moment, I don't know why. But I'm sure I'm not the only one who has done this. Please tell me I'm not. Not that I'm having a 3-course meal before my runs, because that would be disastrous, but I'm also trying to train my stomach to handle a bit more food, because I have a bit of a sensitive stomach, and I think, again, the stomach is a muscle and you need to train it. So I'm trying to train it to handle a bit more food, so to see, again, if I can avoid getting sick during my run or my marathon, just testing things out. So usually granola, but sometimes I try to have a piece of toast too. So just to see if I can train my stomach. How about you? What do you eat before your runs? Then when I get back from my runs, depending on what the length of my run was, if it's 5 to 7 kilometers, I don't really eat too much afterwards, as I'm not out there very long. But anything above that, I try to have second breakfast, just like the hobbits. But I want to make sure that I'm refueling my body, especially after long runs, and that's super important for recovery and just rebuilding your glycogen stores. Eating is so important, and food is just this whole topic, and I love food, I love to eat, and I always want to learn more and get new recipes. And as you probably have seen in other videos, I have a lot of cookbooks, and yeah, I just like to cook. So I think this is just something that I will always kind of keep working on, is just fueling and eating and just seeing if I can do better, even better. I'm excited for this goal in the new year to continue eating. What a hard life. Lesson I learned from this year is that I need to race more often. I really wish I had a Rust Buster race before Boston, but it's hard as, pandemic times. In Canada, there wasn't a lot of in-person races, but now they're slowly coming back, so I'm excited for the new year to kind of do a bit more racing. It's just like performing as musicians. The more you do it, the more comfortable you supposedly get with it, and you learn things from doing it. It's always the weakest part of your piece or just technique or things that likes to flare up during stressful times like performing. And same with racing. You don't know how your body will react under the stress, especially when you're pushing yourself for such a long period of time, like a marathon. When you race more often, you can get kind of in tune with how your body will react, and maybe you can work on things that flare up during your race. I also want to try some different kinds of races. For example, in Halifax or Atlantic Canada, there are some indoor track races in the spring or in the new year, so I really am eyeing the 3,000 and the 5,000 meter. It sounds terrifying as a marathoner, but I think it would be really good to kind of push myself out of my comfort zone. And also, I think it will translate well into marathon running, as getting that kind of speed and translate into running a faster marathon, or so I hope. I also want to run a 10K, as I keep PBing my 10K in other races, so that kind of tells me that I just need to run a 10K and just to see how fast I could run that. It's hard as a marathoner to do lots of marathons during the year because, I'm sorry, I'm not Shalane Flanagan, I can't run marathons back to back to back, but I think with doing some shorter distances and then a couple marathons will kind of help me get used to racing and just a little more comfortable with it. So I'm excited for the new year and all the kind of ideas and goals and races that I have in mind, so I'm excited to see what happens. I've learned lots of things during this year, but the last thing I will talk about is how my body reacted to higher mileage. Before this year, I had never peaked over, I think 110 kilometers was the farthest I had run in a week in 2020. I used this year's spring training cycle as kind of like a test or a dress rehearsal for Boston training cycle, which is going to be in the summer to fall. I wanted to see how my body would react to higher mileage and eventually no days off running. I peaked both training cycles at like around 140 kilometers and again would run every single day. As well as I had never done double runs before this year, so I was super excited to see how my body reacted. I think I learned in general that my body handles it well. I really didn't feel too bad. I think it was probably the last peak training cycle or training week, Boston, that I felt really tired, and it was a pretty struggle to hit my paces in the speed workouts. So I don't know if that was an indication that maybe it was too much for my body or if it was just, you know, the culmination of everything that training cycle. So I think I'm still learning kind of what my body likes to do, or likes, if it likes super high mileage or maybe just slightly less. I'll keep you posted, but for the most part, I really liked doing the higher mileage. In January, I was coming back from an injury, so it really wasn't until like March, April that I really peaked. And then I raced a half marathon, as I didn't want to do another virtual marathon, as I wanted just to save it for Boston in the fall. Looking ahead in the schedule, it was pretty daunting seeing like all the mileage I was running and just no days off, but once I got to it, it was fine. I really just had to make sure I was planning my fueling enough. So for example, I had to make sure that I had enough food for the week, or that I was eating enough after my run so it would recover so I could run the next day. Or if I had a double run, kind of planning out what I was eating in between the two runs, and also learning what not to eat between the two runs. For example, dairy, eggs, anything greasy, not good. I also had to make sure that I was foam rolling and using my R8 and just recovering well, because again, if I didn't, then the day after run would just not go well. I also prioritized getting a massage at least once a month, and if I was feeling especially sore, that I would go see my chiropractor. This really helped me with the higher mileage, so I highly recommend making sure you're getting enough massages, especially if you're running a lot. I wish I was an elite athlete where I could get treatment every week, but can't afford that. Again, overall, I think my body handled the higher mileage fairly well, so I'm excited to kind of take that into the new year and kind of see, again, just how my body reacts to it. And yeah, I'm excited for new training cycles. How about you? What lessons did you learn from running in 2021? Again, I cannot believe that it's almost 2022, but I'm really looking forward to the new year and the new training cycles and all the races and goals I have. As well, I'm excited to continue doing videos on this channel in the new year. And if there's any video topics you'd like me to cover in the new year, please tell me in a comment below. If you like this video, tap that thumbs up button. Thank you for a wonderful year. I've appreciated all your comments and your feedback, and I will see you in 2022. Happy running!